You're listening to the best of the Mantour Guy podcast as we gear up for fall, winter, and a new year into 2021. Enjoy the summer as well as this amazing episode from the past 12 months.
Mantour Ministries presents the Mantour Guy podcast. We may talk about football. We could mention bacon. We might reference Rocky movies. We'll probably discuss the Mantour conferences, but we'll definitely talk about how to grow in our walk with God. Here's your host, the Mantour Guy, Jamie Holden.
Hey guys, welcome to the Mantour Guy podcast. Jamie Holden here, and once again, I'm so happy to have you join us here today. Well guys, it is October, and that means it's almost time for my favorite weekend of the year, the PennDel Potomac Fall Men's Conference. Each year, over 1,400 men gather together to worship God and to be challenged to grow spiritually. And guys, if you've never been to the conference, you may not know what to expect if you go. So this week, I want to give you a chance to hear one of the past sessions, to hear the powerful teachings that you can expect at this year's event. So join us as we look at Pastor Wifredo DeJesus, or Pastor Choco as many know him. And Pastor Choco delivered a powerful challenge for men to stand in the gap in the world in which we live. Guys, I know you're going to gain so much from this powerful message. So we'll be back shortly after this message from Pastor Wilfredo DeJesus, where he talked about, will you stand?
And I was kind of thinking, what's the best way to start? So I thought I'd start with the joke. Because this is a men's conference. Amen. This guy, he was 50 years old. His wife just left him. He was just terrible. He was in depression. He just was going crazy at the age of 50, and he decided he was just going to go and buy a convertible car. He went out and just splurged, and he bought a convertible car, and then he said, you know what, I want to see how fast this car goes. He gets on the expressway. Sure enough, he's 60 miles per hour, 80 miles per hour, 100 miles per hour, 120 miles per hour. He's going, all of a sudden, lights in the rear mirror. State trooper, woo, pull over. Guy pulls over, 50-year-old, he pulls over. State trooper gets off his car, he said, hey, this is my last day as a state trooper. I've been doing this for 30 years. And I've heard all sorts of excuses. But here's what I'm going to do for you. If you tell me an excuse that I've never heard before, I'll let you go. But I do need to see your driver's license and insurance card. And I'll be right back. And gives him the insurance card, gives him the driver's license. Goes to his car. The 50-year-old man is like, oh, my word, what do I tell this guy? Finally, the state trooper comes back. All right, let me have it. Let me hear an excuse I've not heard in 30 years. 50-year-old man says, state trooper, listen, my wife just left me 2 months ago, and she left me for a police officer, and I thought it was you bringing her back to me, and that's why I was going really fast. Now, guys, don't get me in trouble with your wives. Because your wife is going to ask you, what did you learn? And don't say, hey, babe, sit down, let me tell you a joke. She's like, that's why I sent you over there? Don't do that, amen. Hey, I'm Pastor Choco. I pastor a church in Chicago. I love being with men. I'm proud to be a man. I'm proud to be a man. It was in the Garden of Eden when God came, when the marriage was messed up between Adam and Eve. And God came into the Garden of Eden and he said, Adam, where are you? I don't even want to talk to Eve. I want to talk to you. Because I put you in charge of this garden. It was in a men's conference, and that saved my marriage. I didn't say this last year, I'll tell you, man. I've been married 25 years to my wife, and to the glory of God, we just completed 25 years a few months ago. Yeah. The good thing about it is that my wife said that she signed a contract for another 25 years. Amen. But it was not always been a happy marriage. As a matter of fact, the first 5 years of my marriage, I thought for sure we'd end up in a divorce. We were going separate. We were in church. She was the pastor's daughter. We've got a few kids. We were just totally disconnected. We were totally not in communication. And although I loved Jesus and she loved Jesus, this wasn't working. Something was wrong with this marriage. And I went to a men's conference, something like this. And it was at that conference where God shook my world. He shook my world of the godly man that he's called me to be, and that I wasn't acting like that at home. And I remember being at the altar at that men's conference for hours, just crying and repenting to God. And I remember getting back on a Sunday morning and went to church with my wife, and I remember taking her to the kitchen. I said, I need you to sit down. Well, that was unusual because she did all the talking. I said, I need to talk to you. She sat down in the kitchen, true. And this is not even part of my sermon, because I'm talking to somebody here tonight. I said, I need you to sit down. And for 3 hours, I spoke and knelt down before her. I repented for being the coward, not being the spiritual leader, not being the husband, not being the father. 3 hours I stood in that kitchen. And I think it was that was the pivotal point in my marriage that totally changed everything. And I pray that this weekend, for you men who have left your homes, your wives, your children, that you've come to a conference where it says, leaving no man behind. That's including your wife. That's including your children. That whatever it takes, you would do it. Because God is coming to your garden and he's asking you, where are you? I don't want to talk to your wife. I want to talk to you. And I pray that you would reconcile with the God that loves you. I would pray that you would reconcile with your family and your wives, because the devil is out there to destroy, to steal, to delay the blessing that God has for you and your family. Can I get a witness here tonight? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Right after the service, I'll be in the back to hug you men and to whatever, and got some books back there of amazing faith. I'll be back there signing books if you want one, and it'll bless your life. I'll be back there right after the service. But I do want to get into my teaching here tonight. They told me I've got like 2 hours. Some of the guys who are new to the church, they're like, oh, they didn't tell me this. I want to tell you here tonight, brother, you were set up. You were set up. Go to Ezekiel chapter 22. This is a theme that God has placed in my belly for America and for the Church of Jesus Christ. I've been preaching this around, and even in my church. Ezekiel chapter 22, verse 30. When you have it, say amen. This is the prophet. At this point in time, to give you context, men, Ezekiel is heading towards Babylon. He's in captivity. King Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem in 586 BC. And he's part of the 50,000, if you will, that are taken into exile. And God speaks to the man of God. He speaks through the man of God. And here's what God is saying, not only in this era, but I truly believe that God is speaking to the church even as we live here today. Here's what God said. I look for someone among them who would what? Build up the walls and stand before me in the what? In the gap on behalf of the land, so I would not have to destroy it. God said, but I found no one. I did not find a man. I did not find an ish. I did not find an isha. I didn't find not one person who would rebuild the walls, who would stand in the gap for the people, for the poor, for the disenfranchised. I'm trying to tell you here tonight that God is looking towards America, and he's saying to the church of Jesus Christ, and he's saying in particularly to the men of the church, where are you? Where are you? Because I don't see you. I don't find a man who would dare to stand in the gap. I don't find a man who would dare to pray in the gap. I don't find a man who would worship in the gap. I told you that in 586 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar comes and he conquers Jerusalem. He destroys the temple. He destroys the walls. And 50,000 Jews are taken into captivity. Watch this. And as a result of that, that created a gap situation. And when I talk to you tonight about a gap, I'm trying to tell you that the gap is a place of vulnerability. The gap is a place of exposure. The gap is a place of sacrifice. I'm trying to tell you tonight that when you decide as a man of God to stand in the gap, you are now risking your life. Can't get no help here tonight. A gap is a place of limitations, a place of exposure. It's a place of threat. God says to America, he says to the church, he says to the men, I am looking for a man, someone in Pennsylvania, somebody who would be willing to give their lives. And I didn't find anyone. Can you imagine that the walls of Jerusalem, since 586 BC to the time of 445 BC, before Christ, that puts it at 141 years. Watch this. Can you imagine that the walls of Jerusalem been destroyed for 141 years and not one man had the audacity to go and rebuild it? Everybody passed by the walls. Come on now. Pastor Choco, everyone had to go by the wall and said, that's not my job. I didn't destroy these walls. And they kept walking by Jerusalem. Meanwhile, women are being raped by different tribes. Meanwhile, homes are being broken into. But that's not my problem, Pastor Choco. What's happening here? I didn't create that problem. I didn't say that you did. What I'm trying to tell you here tonight, that God is saying, I'm just looking for somebody, a man, a young boy who would be willing to stand in the gap. Throughout history, men, throughout history, look in the scripture, look and even in our history, every time there was a problem in the world, a great man or a great woman will stand up and speak out. Dr. King spoke out about injustice, and he died. Dietrich Bonhoeffer in 1945 spoke out against the Nazis of what they were doing towards the Jews, and they hung him in April 9, 1945. He stood in the gap for those who were not even his culture, but he saw an injustice, and he had to stand in the gap and say, wait a minute. I'm just in my introduction. We're talking about band of brothers. It's a cute saying. Kind of cute. Yeah, Pastor Choco, leave no man behind. Stop. Do you actually know what that means? That means you got to go back. That means you got to go back to danger. To go back and leave and say, I'm not going to leave a man behind. I'm not going to leave my daughter behind, my son behind, my marriage behind. That means you got to go back. Watch this. Moses stood in the gap. If it wasn't for Moses, the people of Israel would still be in Egypt, captivity. Joseph stood in the gap. Mother Teresa stood in the gap. Go down the list and you will find great men and women. Esther stood in the gap. Noah stood in the gap. But there's one man here tonight I want to talk to you about. His name is Nehemiah. I want to tell you that this man named Nehemiah stood in the gap for Jerusalem. Can I just give you a little bit backdrop about who Nehemiah is? He's living in the city of Susa. He has a good job. He has a good 401k plan, a good retirement. He's living large. He is the cupbearer to the king. He's like the chief of staff to the president. And he's living at large. One day, as he brushed his hair and he brushed his teeth, he went out to Starbucks. How many like Starbucks here? He went to Starbucks and he saw one of his friends. Hey, what's up, Ese? Hannah, how are you doing? And if you really don't want to know how they're doing, then don't ask. And Hannah comes from Jerusalem, 760 miles, traveled from a devastation, a city that's being raped, that they're stealing the food of the people. Yes, the temple has been restored by Ezra and Zerubbabel, but something is still missing. Men, you could go ahead and fill your spirit with worship and workshops, but something is still missing. You got to protect the temple. You cannot allow it to be exposed. And Nehemiah saw this guy at Starbucks and he said, how you doing? He says, you really want to know? The walls have been destroyed for 141 years. Our women are being raped. And no one has done anything. Nehemiah, I've come here to tell you, listen, man, with revelation comes responsibility. When God reveals to you something, you got no other choice but to act. You got to do something. You can't close your eyes, because with revelation comes responsibility. When God reveals to you that there's a gap in your marriage, when there's a gap in your relationship with your children, that there's a gap in your community, that you see injustice, it's because God is trying to move you. And I looked around the planet, he said, and the Bible says that the eyes of God is roaming to and fro to see whose heart is fully committed to him. And I said to Nehemiah, we're in trouble. And the walls are broken. Now notice what Nehemiah does. He's the cupbearer. He's got the information. Notice what he does. He doesn't react to it right away. I tell some folks that Nehemiah, thank God he wasn't Puerto Rican. Had Nehemiah been Puerto Rican, we would have been right up there, Jerusalem, right away. But Nehemiah, he did something. He prayed. Something that we men do very little of. It is a weapon that you have, but it's a weapon we don't use. I got this, Pastor Choco. My wife doesn't have to tell me. My children, my pastor doesn't have to tell me. My men's director doesn't have to tell me. And yet you don't even pray. No wonder your walls are collapsing. No wonder our relationship is a mess. And the enemy has access because you don't have the courage to get on your knees and say, God, use me to repair these walls. I'm sick and tired. And the Bible says that Nehemiah prayed, not for 1 week. He didn't pray for 2 weeks. He prayed for several months before he went to the king. And even then, it was the king who noticed something on him. You following me? Nehemiah got access. An ordinary day at Starbucks is about to change his life for the rest of it. You all came to the men's conference. You just got here. Some of you all straight from work. An ordinary day. Yet your world's about to be turned upside down. Your life is about to be turned upside down. Come on, somebody give him praise and glory. Nehemiah had influence. He had responsibility. And can I tell you, men, here something tonight? That Nehemiah wasn't a prophet. Nehemiah wasn't even a priest. Nehemiah was a layman. Most likely, perhaps an usher, if you will, or deacon of a church. He wasn't even a priest. But he sensed something in his spirit that he just cannot see something and do nothing about it. Oh, God, give us men in this conference who truly are men who will leave no man behind. God, give us men with audacity, with the courage, that when they see a gap, that they're willing to sustain it and to be in this gap. Nehemiah was a layman. He wasn't a priest. He could have easily said, hey, bad situation for you guys in Jerusalem. I'll be praying for you all. God be with you. I'm sick and tired of men and women using prayer as a crutch not to do anything. Pastor Choco, I'm just going to pray about it. Hey, I believe in prayer and you should pray. I believe it. But there comes a time where that prayer has to convert to action. Has to convert to action. I just cannot allow my city to go down the drains. I cannot allow the prostitutes, the gangbangers go down the drain. And I see it every day and not do anything. Nehemiah, sure, he prayed, but it just didn't stay there. Nehemiah did something about it. Not only did he pray, men, look at me. Not only did he pray, but he planned. So you're here at this conference. Your wives, your children, your daughters are praying for you, that you have an encounter, that you would see a theophany like Moses. Not only did he pray, but he planned. The Bible says that he asked for letters from different governors as he passed through different villages. I'm trying to tell you that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. You got to plan as men. Well, my wife is the one that does everything, Pastor Choco. That's the problem. She thought she married a man. I'm convinced, not even part of the sermon. I'm convinced that women really want to follow true leadership. And when they don't see it in us, they bypass us and go to God. Because we're not true leaders at home. We fail in our planning. We fail in our prayer lives. Our children don't see us praying and planning. Every October, I sit down with my family and my wife and we plan for the next year. We planned what we're going to do as a family, who are we going to help, who are we going to bless during Christmas. We planned. And we prayed. Before I came here, my wife was praying, lay hands on me before I came here. God says, I looked on the planet Earth and I was looking for a man who would stand in the gap, and I didn't find anybody. God put this in my belly maybe 6 months ago. Go around the planet and tell him I'm looking. Because I'm just not going to pour my blessing on anybody.
All right, guys, we'll be back with the remainder of this message from Pastor Choco right after these breaks.
Yep. You're listening to the Mantour Guy Podcast.
Have you been looking for a Bible study that you can work through with your wife? Maybe you want to do devotional time with your daughter. Guys, we have the answer for you. You can buy both the men's and women's edition of Whatever It Takes for $15. This amazing deal is only available at our Mantour Ministries online store. If you go to Amazon, it is $14.99 for just the men's version. So many men are buying both versions and going through them with their wives and daughters. Do not miss this opportunity. Take advantage of this amazing deal today at mantourministries.com and click on the online store button.
Order your copy today at mantourministries.com. follow The Mantour Guy on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks.
Did you know that over 33% of girls have seen pornography online before the age of 13? Protect your daughters by installing Covenant Eyes on all your computers and mobile devices. Covenant Eyes blocks all pornography so that it can't reach your little girl and cause damage to her spiritually or emotionally. Sign up today using the code MANTOR and receive 1 month of service free. Guys, that's a no-brainer. Try it for a month and see how it helps protect your precious daughters from the filth of internet porn. Sign up using code MANTOR, MANTOUR, at CovenantEyes.com today.
Listen to the Mantour Guy podcast on the go via Apple Podcast and Google Play. Thanks.
Hey guys, Jamie Holden here. Did you know that only 10% of churches have a healthy, thriving men's ministry? That's only 1 out of 10 churches. Well, my mission is to see this number become 100%. Join me in my work with HEUS Missions to help develop men's ministry in the local church. Become a monthly financial investor in the work God called me to do by going to mentorministries.com/partner and clicking on the Give Online button. Together, we can see God continue to move among men.
Welcome back to the Mantour Guy podcast.
Nehemiah, he prayed, he planned, and then he proceeded. Because with prayer and planning, you now have to act. You have to proceed towards the problem. You just cannot close your eyes to the problem. And how many know, look at me, man, how many know that when you pray and you plan and you proceed to do something, that it does not come without challenges? That the moment you want to get your life right, the moment you want to be that man of God, the moment you want to be the priest of the home, the devil gets up and he sends an attack upon you. It does not come without challenges. Took you something to get here. If we were to hear stories and testimonies, the hell that took you to get here, so that you can be delivered. And that you would be that father that was standing in the gap for their teenage son who's lost without Jesus. Because there's a gap, and God is saying, I'm looking for somebody who has the courage to stand in the middle and fight and pray and worship. It doesn't come without challenges. The Bible says that when Nehemiah approached Jerusalem, watch this. That when Nehemiah approached Jerusalem, there was 3 groups or 3 people. First one was Sanballat. You know them. As a matter of fact, Sanballat's name means, may sin come to life. The guy who was ridiculing Nehemiah because he was rebuilding the walls, his name means, may sin come to life. And that's what he wanted him to do. He wanted Nehemiah to stop the project. He wanted Nehemiah to stop rebuilding the walls so that he could have some time to reload. Anytime you decide to rebuild, it comes with challenges. Anytime you stand for what you believe, it comes with challenges. Sin will come after you. The devil will send every assassin against you. Are you listening to me tonight? These men, as Nehemiah was rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem that had been destroyed for 141 years, these men at the mountaintop were trying to distract him. They were trying to derail him, to stop him from rebuilding. You know what Nehemiah did? Nehemiah said, I ain't got time for this foolishness. I ain't got time for this foolishness. I came to this conference to rebuild my life. I came to this city to rebuild the city. Enough is enough. Notice in the time of Nehemiah prayed to the Lord. And if you notice his prayer, he even asked God, he tells God, forgive us for the sins of my ancestors. He even included himself. And that's the first thing you got to come to the realization with men, that you're going to have to look in the mirror and say, listen, the reason why we're in a mess is because I'm not the man. I got all the tools. I got the title, but I'm not acting like it. Not the priest of the home. And Sanballat was calling Nehemiah to come and stop the work. And Nehemiah said, I ain't got time for this. Keep building, keep building. There's another gentleman. His name is Tobiah. If you're taking notes, Tobiah, his name means division. The problem with Tobiah is that Tobiah was also a Jew. He was living in there with them, with the Sanballats, but he would come into Jerusalem. In other words, the problem was inside. And his job, Tobiah, was to go to different family members and talk. What do you think about what Nehemiah's doing? He's a fool, isn't he? These walls have been like this for 141 years. Who does he think he is? What do you guys think? And he'll go over here to this family. What do you guys think? Nehemiah's a fool, isn't he? His job is to bring division. There's another gentleman, Geshem. Geshem, his name means storm. Now you and I know that storms come to destroy. Storms come from the outside. And most of our attacks as men come from the outside to destroy the very thing you're trying to rebuild in your life. Storms. And all these things came against him. Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, they came all against Nehemiah. But Nehemiah was focused and rebuilding his walls. These walls of Jerusalem have to rebuild. What is there of value that your temple is built, but the walls are destroyed? What value is it that you got a good Bible, yet the walls in your house are destroyed? The enemy has come in, destroyed your teenage daughter, your family, your structure. Walls are destroyed. They're gone. They don't even exist. Because we have not been men enough to stand. There is no walls, Pastor Choco. The demons come as they will. Because the last 10 years of my life, the last 15 years, the last 2 years, the last year of my life, I've allowed access to my wife, pornography, addiction, and these walls collapse. And I'm being raped. My children, their minds are being raped. Their hearts are being perverted. And I'm watching all this happen in my family, and I don't have the courage to stand. I'm here to tell you tonight that God is saying, I'm looking for a man. I'm looking for somebody who will be willing to stand in the Ibaniam. The word Ibaniam means gap. I need somebody who would go back to their cities. I need someone who will go back to their communities. I need someone to go back to their families and their structures and their marriages and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Just don't say it. Do it. He'll try to bring division to you. He'll try to destroy you. Challenges will come your way. Storms will come in your life. He'll try to stir up things as a man. I totally believe that everything begins with you and I. Our prayer lives, our homes. Despite of the storm, Nehemiah pressed through the storms. Despite of the criticism, Nehemiah pressed through the criticism. Despite of the division that was trying to be created, Nehemiah pressed through and he started rebuilding the walls. Even as critics started talking, he started rebuilding the walls. Because what you have to do is you have to start somewhere. Notice in Nehemiah, in the story, that he goes out in the morning and he inspects the walls that are already built. He wanted to make sure that the walls that were already built were fortified. He wanted to make sure that before we start building these walls or the wall that's in the gap, that these other walls are good before I start rebuilding. You talk about the guy who lived in Susa. The guy who had it all. And in his mind, I just can't be told that this is like this. So I go back to my wife after 5 years and at that men's conference and repented at the kitchen table. I told her from this day forward, I'm going to rebuild these walls that I didn't have the courage to do. Repented towards her, took responsibility, didn't put it on her. There's a reason why, man. There's a reason why that God has built or that God created women from the rib of Adam. So that you can protect her. So that you can love her. Not govern her, but to love her. I am convinced that the walls of this nation are deteriorating. That the Church of Jesus Christ is the last line of defense. I'm convinced as I go around and speak to politicians, as I go around and speak to churches, that the church is the greatest institution on planet Earth. That the Church of Jesus Christ is the greatest institution on planet Earth. But hear me out, that if there's going to be any restoration, if there's going to be anything being renewed and restored, it has to start with you and I. Because I truly believe that when a man stands up, the boy sits down. God, give us men who will stand up and take their place in the Ibaniam. Take their place in the gap that's been created because of our lack of leadership. Nehemiah, for 52 days, rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem with criticism, division. He prayed, he planned, and he moved forward. He proceeded with the plan. It's not enough just to come to a conference and get fired up. We don't want you to do that. We don't want you to have goosebumps. We want you to leave out of here as men, godly men, who would go back and begin to rebuild relationships, rebuild, and be able to go back to their pastors and the directors of leadership of men's ministry and tell them, thank you for bringing me to the men's conference. One out of every 5 homes, someone's been sexually abused. 47% of the children in America will go to sleep today with no father in their homes. Gaps have been created. The average homeless person in America is not 35, is 9 years old. Gaps have been created. Every 20 seconds in our nation, there's an abortion. Gaps have been created. And God is saying, I'm looking for a Nehemiah. I'm looking for a David, a Michael, who will stand. Oh, thank God that 545 years later from Nehemiah, the ultimate gap person came to planet Earth. 545 years later, the ultimate gap person came to this planet. He saw that you and I were destined for destruction. He saw that we were separated from God. He saw that there was a disconnect. And what Jesus Christ came and he built a bridge so that you can have access to his Father. Even at the cross, even at the mountaintop, between the two thieves, Jesus was the ultimate gap person. One said to him, if you are the Christ, save yourself. The other guy said, hey, we're thieves. And said to Jesus, remember me when you enter to your paradise. And Jesus in the middle is the gap person. Said, today. That's exactly why I came, to create a bridge. That's exactly why you were born a man. That's why you were born a man, to stand in the gap when your family is sleeping, that you're there at 4 o'clock in the morning by the kitchen praying, interceding like Job, praying for your children, praying that if they have offended God, that God would forgive them. That's why you were created a man. When I say that I'm proud to be a man, it's because with that comes responsibility. That when I see a gap situation, listen to me, men, when I see a gap situation, that I have the audacity to stand in it. In my city, in my community. When little girls are being trafficked at the age of 9 years old, that I stand in the gap and say, wait a minute, I'll buy her back. How much does she cost? Because you can't have sex with her. I'm sick of it. And that's what we've done. And God says in Ezekiel, I am looking. I'm looking. Who would stand in the gap in your city, in your towns? And he said, I found no one who had the courage to be willing to die. I get death threats by pimps because I take their prostitutes. I get them. 252 prostitutes have been rescued. They have been rescued from the streets of Chicago. Tonight, 22 men who are homeless are sleeping in one of my homes. Someone has to fill that gap. I don't know how God has blessed you, pastors, leaders, but in your city, you could think of gaps that you can stand and say, wait a minute, stop. Enough is enough. 2 Sundays ago, I was in a prison. I don't know if this is being recorded, but let me qualify myself. I went to prison with my wife. I went to Texas to visit 490 women who were about to be deported from this nation. And regardless of where you stand with it, hear me out. 490 women, they didn't know I was coming. And I came to give them church service. And would you know that out of the 490 women, close to 300 plus women were evangelicals? That they didn't come to this nation illegal. They came legally. They had documents. They had their visas. They had their residential. And when the residential lapsed, that made them illegal. And they're saying to me, Pastor, we try to pay. We try to go, but there's no system. I've been here in your country for 20 years. Why are they deporting us? And I stood there in front of all these women and apologized to them how we've treated them. Because God is looking how we deal with strangers. Not all of them are crooks. Some of them, you sure, and deport them, but not all of them. I stood in the gap on a Sunday, and I hugged all these women. I wanted to be Jesus to them. That if no one, and they said to me, Pastor, no one has ever apologized to us for how we're being treated. You don't have to look too far. Go back to your homes and see if there's a gap situation. Nehemiah went back home. That's his home. That's where his family came from. Some of you, God is stirring up to go back to your cities. Perhaps where you were saved, maybe from gangs and drugs. God is saying, I want you to go back and stand in a gap and fight for them. Let me finish here. Stand with me for a moment. Stand with me. No one talking. He prayed. God, Father, forgive us for the sins of my ancestors, for the sins of my father. He prayed. He got the news that something was wrong. Look at me, man. He got the news that something was wrong in Jerusalem, and he didn't close his eyes to it. If the whole theme about this conference is leaving no men behind, then you got to go back. And to go back means you're going to be vulnerable. The devil has you like a bullseye. He's, oh, you really want to do that? I'm going to take you out. Well, take me out. But what I cannot do is be a man, have the title, and watch things happen and do nothing about it. That I cannot do. I've got to stand in the gap. I got to fight for my marriage. I got to fight for my teenage daughter. I got to fight. I got to pray in the gap. I got to worship in the gap. And he's telling America, he's telling the church, I'm looking. And I don't find no one. Men are like, hey, listen, this marriage doesn't work. Just find me another woman. I'm done. Really? What a wimp. That's not a man. Can we be real? We're men in here. There's no women in here. We're all men. That was my mindset. You know why? Because my father divorced my mom at the age of 8 years old. My brothers divorced their wives. So in my mind, I said, okay, I guess it's going to happen. Everyone divorced in my family. I guess I got to get divorced too. It's just so easier that way. Because to restore the marriage takes a lot of work. A lot of challenges. I stood in that kitchen kneeling down before my wife, Elizabeth. Sorry for the sins, the things I've said to you. Had that not happened, there would not be 252 women rescued from prostitution. Had that not happened, there would not be 400 plus women in prison that were spoken to. Do you see, one man's obedience is connected to another man's destiny. You are a man because you can deal with it. There's something about us that God made us. Whatever storms, whatever critics, whatever division. No, because I'm a man of God. And it can't happen in this watch. In just a few moments, I'm going to challenge you. I know this is not part of the program, but they said I can do whatever I want to do. I don't know you from Adam. Some of you, man, I don't know you. But you're my brother. You're my brother. And our interest as leaders is that you would succeed. And in just a few moments, I'm going to challenge you. God is saying, I'm looking for a Moses. I'm looking for an Esther, a Nehemiah, a Joseph. Joseph in the pit with no worship team. No choir. In the pit. Going through 13 years of prisons, of false accusations. But he stood. He stood. I'm going to be faithful. Because God has a plan. I'm going to hold this together. And I'm going to be a bridge for my children, for friends, my community. And even if I get hit, I'm not letting go. Because I'm a man. And God made me a man. He didn't make me a wimp. Yeah. Some of you all right now have gap situations. You came here with walls that are destroyed. But we're starting off this conference right. In just a few moments, you're going to come to this altar. And when you finish praying, we can start from this side. I want you to come here. And in your mind and your spirit, I'm standing for my wife. I'm standing for my marriage. And then get off. I'm going to stand in the gap. Because we men, look at me, we men, we're visual people. We need visual. That's why Jesus taught with fish. He had 12 guys. Here's the fish. Here's the bread. Multiplication. Got it. Praise God. He knew that men are very visual men. We need to see it. And so tonight when the katinas are singing, I want to thank you, God, for what you've done for me. That you saved me. Some of you men should not even be here. Should have been dead. But he saved you so that you could go back to your cities and towns. With every head bowed and every eyes closed. Yeah. How many of you would say, Pastor Choco, walls in my life are destroyed? I'm the blame to it. I'm not even going to pass the buck and throw my wife under the bus. I'm not going to throw my pastor under the bus. It's me. I just didn't act like the man. But I want to thank God that God disturbed me. How many of you here at the sound of my voice will say, Pastor Choco, there's walls that are crumbling. And I need to go back and fix that because I don't want to leave not one man behind. I don't want to leave my daughter behind. I don't want to leave my son behind. Pray for me. God, that I would have the audacity, that I would have the courage to leave this conference to go back and say, sit down, I want to talk to you. We're going to start rebuilding. How many of you who say, that's me? That's me. My walls are crumbling. At the sound of my voice, if that's you, lift up your hand quickly. Quickly. Not here to play around. I didn't come from Chicago to play with you. Families are destroying. The devil's having a field day. And God said to you here in Pennsylvania, I am looking for an Ish who will stand in the Ibanayim. Who? And if that's you, I'm going to count to 3. On the balcony, on the top. And when you're done praying at this altar, and you feel led by the Lord, come and stand in between this wall. And say, I'm going to stand. Whatever that is, I'm standing for my marriage. I'm standing for my children. I'm going to fight. And then walk right off. 1. This is me, Pastor Choco. My life is destroyed. My addiction has the better of me. Since I was a teenage boy, Pastor Choco, I've been addicted to pornography. My walls have collapsed. 2. When I get to 3, if you raise your hand, don't let the devil paralyze you. Some of you are already leaving right now. Some of you are already leaving right now. 3, right now. Do it right now as we sing this song. Come.
The Mantour Guy's final thought.
This was such a powerful challenge to the men to stand in the gap, and I can still remember seeing the hundreds upon hundreds of men lining up to stand in the gap around the altar. God moved mightily that day, as he always does every year at the PennDel Potomac Conference. And guys, I cannot recommend this conference highly enough to you. And the good news is you can still register to attend this year's Courage Men's Conference, which is taking place at Trinity Life Church in Baltimore, Maryland on October 19th through 20th. They have another great lineup of speakers. It's a great place to come and worship God with other men, to be challenged spiritually and to grow in your walk with God, which is what we're all about here at the Mantour Guy Podcast. Guys, you do not want to miss it. For more information, you can visit CourageMen'sConference.com. That's CourageMen'sConference.com. Well, guys, once again, thank you for listening, for giving us your time today. I would love it if you took a second and shared this podcast to your social media accounts. We'd love to be able to reach more men and help them grow in their walk with God as well. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, and leave a review on iTunes or Apple Podcast. We're also now available on Google Play. Guys, the more 5-star ratings and reviews you leave, the more men can find us in their searches. Also, don't forget to visit MantourMinistries.com to learn more about our conferences, books, and resources. Again, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week on the Mantour Guy Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Mantour Guy Podcast. Be sure to visit MantourMinistries.com to learn more about our books, men's ministry resources, and our Mantour conferences.
Hey guys, the Mantour Guy, Jamie Holden here. I'd love to come share at your church, at your men's ministry, at your next men's event, or men's breakfast. I have a challenging word for God's men to help them become the men that God has called them to be. If you'd like to have me come share with your group, visit MantourMinistries.com to contact me about coming to challenge and encourage your church's men to grow in their walk with God. Before we go, guys, one last thing. We did talk about it in the podcast, but if you sign up with Covenant Eyes at CovenantEyes.com and you use the code Mantour when you check out, you can receive 1 month of free service. Guys, what do you got to lose? You can try for 30 days, see how great it is, see how helpful it is to your walk with God. I guarantee you're not going to want to get rid of it. You're going to love it. So try it, protect yourself, protect your family, and raise up a standard against the enemy as he is trying to attack you and your loved ones. Try Covenant Eyes for free for 30 days using the code MANTOUR. It's MANTOUR at CovenantEyes.com. Try it today, guys. What do you got to lose?
The Mantour Guy Podcast, helping men grow in their walk with God.